Ooh, welcome back to Up in the Blue Seats, our New York Rangers podcast from the New York Post. Those highlights you heard courtesy of MSG Network after a New York Rangers overtime win over the New Jersey Devils, further confirming New York is better than New Jersey. I've tried to tell people over and over it's better. Molly might fight that with me as a girl originally from Jersey, now making her way to New York, but don't at me. New York is better than New Jersey, period.
No quarrels there. I'm in a complete agreement.
Wow, okay, see?
It's
It's
New York
confirmed.
it's New York or nowhere, if you ask me.
Let's
Sorry.
go. When the girl from Jersey says it, it's confirmed true. Because a lot of people have told me. And listen, Jersey, I guess, could be better to raise a family because it's bigger homes, a little bit more space. You have a driveway. You don't have alternate side parking 4 days a week like I do here. I get it. It's a little maybe you could. I don't. The dirty things, whatever. I feel like everywhere is dirty. But New York's better. Anyways, that's beside the point. It's Jake Brown here alongside Mollie Walker. The Rangers did take down the Devils. New York took down New Jersey. So why don't we talk to Mr. Devil later in the show? Ken Daneyko from MSG SportsNet, the Devils color analyst, 20 years with the Devils, 40 years with the organization, which is insane. And he will join us later in the show. Molly, it's this roller coaster ride. I mean, every week it's like, oh, they have to win this one. Now 4 wins in a row. They beat the Devils, 2 goals in 7 seconds. If you left your seat to hit the bathroom, you probably missed something. What a game on Monday. And after losing the Devils 2 weeks ago, this is a hell of a way to respond.
100%. And I think that the Rangers have had a problem stacking wins this season in general, which is one of the stark differences from last season to this one. Last season, they were stacking 3, 4, 5, 6 wins as if it was second nature to them. And this 4-game winning streak is a season high. And really the only way that the Rangers are going to salvage this season is if they go on a little bit of a run here or continue to stack wins like this in bunches. It'll just be crucial, but they have already made up some ground in the Metropolitan Division. They are still trailing the Devils, who are at the top by a long shot. But that's because the Devils are just definitely no joke. I mentioned it the last time we were on the podcast after they lost after the Devils beat the Rangers the first time in the first meeting. But I think that the Rangers are starting to look at it in a more simple way. 2 points. That's all they need to get every single night, no matter how it comes. Doesn't matter how they get there, whether if it's a come from behind win or if they defend a lead, they just got to get the 2 points. And that's really all that matters at this point in time for the Rangers.
And you never know what you're going to get in this game because it was 2-0, 5 minutes in, Molly. Then it's 2-1, 3-1. And then the Devils get a penalty shot and you're like, this thing's about to be over already. And the Devils are about to blow out the Rangers again. Igor gets the stop, a combo of his stick and his foot all in one. I'm not Steve Valaket over here, but
poke check.
Yeah, a little poke check, we'll call it. And that turns the game around because less than 2 minutes later, 2 goals, 7 seconds, and then Hedl wins it in overtime. This team showed resilience. This is a team that's blown 2 to 3 goal leads before. This time they come back from 2, nearly 3 if that penalty shot were to go in. And we're seeing a team playing together and everyone getting involved. And it's a fun product of hockey to watch. And you couldn't say that about 2 to 3 weeks ago.
And I actually thought it was pretty interesting how after that missed penalty shot from Jack Hughes, that Larry and I were talking about this in the press box, he faded to the background a little bit. He was absolutely electric at the start of the game, and he turned it back up toward the end of the game as well. But during that second period, back and forth, where the Rangers definitely did have the upper hand, Hughes kind of lost a little bit of confidence there. It was pretty clear. And I think that's just a byproduct of him still having the young mistakes inside of him, even though he is in the midst of this unbelievable breakout season. So I think that Ranger fans can take that and see that obviously their young talent is still working through said growing pains as well. And it doesn't just go away altogether right away. And it's even Jack Hughes is still a work in progress in that regard, even though he is absolutely lighting it up this season.
Yeah, he really is. I mean, that backhander was tremendous.
No, it's filthy.
Yeah,
absolutely disgusting.
Yeah, put that on SportsCenter after having Linda Cohn on last week. They made it through the tough stretch. We talked about going to Vegas, boom, win easy. Going to Colorado, boom, win easy. being that, I mean, Devils, boom, win easy. Not easy, obviously, both in Colorado and against the Devils. Coming up, Maple Leafs Thursday come to the Garden, at the Flyers, at the Blackhawks, and then at the Penguins before the Islanders come to MSG. And we drop another episode of Up in the Blue Seats next week. Well, we'll have Ken Daneyko join us in a few minutes, but let's, before that, Molly, go to our subtext questions. I know they missed you. They missed chiming in. So let's go to them. Apparently everyone has asked this. What is the deal with Vitali Kravtsov?
That's the question. I think at this point, it's safe to infer that Gerard Gallant does not trust Vitali Kravtsov. And that's a fair assessment for a coach that's trying to turn this season around. Gerard Gallant makes his decisions. Everything that he does is in the name of winning games. And when you've got a player who has struggled to stay on the ice, who is still a work in progress and is further behind everybody else in terms of his development, it's hard to fault him for not wanting to play Vitali Kravtsov, but at the same time, this season is going to be a complete waste if they don't find out what they have in Vitali Kravtsov. They're not going to know what they have in him. And if they let him walk at the end of the season and he goes elsewhere and he gets top line minutes, top power play minutes, and he emerges as this offensive force that he was in Russia, I mean, well, then the Rangers are SOL. and that would be really unfortunate and kind of just plays into this trend that the Rangers have been on of mismanaging their top draft picks and their high end talent. And that would be unfortunate. So the question is obviously now that they're winning, Gallant isn't going to change his personnel. So I think it'll take another losing streak or an injury for Vitali Kravtsov to crack this lineup right now. So it's a balancing act and it's kind of tough. It's a tough situation for Gerard Gallant because he is just trying to win games and right now they're finally kind of back on that track and Vitali Kravtsov is just too much of a high risk at this point in his eyes, I'm sure.
And for the 90% of listeners that don't know what SOL means and are looking up and they're like, Sol, it means shiitake mushrooms out of luck is what it means. SOL. So there you go. Larry Antis and Gerard Russamano want to know, when will Sammy Blais be gone? What is the obsession with Blais? Well, that's not very nice.
Yeah, not very nice. And Sammy Blais is a very interesting case because last season, right before his ACL injury, he looked like he had a really high ceiling. He looked like he had an offensive upside to him. And if he didn't get hurt, it looked like he was going to be a real great bottom six contributor. I think that he's still not 100% since that injury. That's a really tough injury to work back from and start feeling like the player that you once were. So I think that's definitely a factor for Sammy Blais. He's still looking for his first goal with the Rangers, and the obsession with Sammy Blais is that he was part of a pretty bad trade. Obviously, everybody knows that Pavel Buchnevich and the player that he is, the player that he was with the Rangers, and what he's been doing in St. Louis, the trade was just extremely one-sided. And Sammy Blais being the feature return in that trade is what makes the Rangers' obsession. The Rangers are not going to take Sammy Blais out of the lineup because that's almost like admitting 110% defeat on that trade. And maybe if the Rangers were able to get a first round pick out of that trade, it might have been received a little better. But because it was just a second round pick and then Sammy Blais, who hasn't been the impact player that the Rangers were probably hoping that he would be, it just makes the trade look extremely one-sided and not a good look, I guess you could say. So that's where the obsession comes from, is the fact that he was in that trade with Pavel Buchnevich, who is just tearing it up in St. Louis and just is the player that everybody knew that he was in New York when he was on the top line on the KZB line with Kreider and Zibanejad. But I feel for Sammy Blais because obviously he's still working back from that ACL injury, and that's a tough one to fully turn around from.
Yeah, I mean, you said tearing it up. I was going to say to Torre's ACL. Some guys just take longer than others to recover. It's not easy. It's the three most feared letters in sports, and we see it almost every week in the NFL. Frank Ralpho wants to know: are the Rangers wasting their time in attempting to accrue cap space, since they will have no chance at advancing, even if they make the playoffs? Wow, a way too early prediction there. Frank.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a little harsh, especially because the Rangers are definitely there's still so much time in the season. You never know what's going to happen. For all we know, the Devils could go on a 13-game losing streak. You just never know what's going to happen. Obviously, the Metro is so tight, so competitive, and the Rangers have made up some ground. They're only 1 to 3 points separated from the surrounding teams, around them. And they are trailing the Devils by a lot, but that's neither here nor there. But I don't think it's a waste of time. It can never be a waste of time, especially when you look at what the Rangers were able to do last season with the additions that they brought in at the trade deadline. It made the world of difference. And you never know who could be coming in at the trade deadline, what moves Chris Drury has up his sleeve when that time arrives. And it could be the difference between a short playoff stint and a long playoff stint. And I think that's 100% what happened with the Rangers last season. I think Andrew Kopp, Tyler Mott, Frank Vetrano, even Justin Braun made the world of difference for the Rangers in the last season's playoff run.
You never know if Patrick Kane could be a Ranger. Boom, take a shot. We got our Patrick Kane reference in for the week. It's now a tradition on the show. Dennis Petruzzelli wants to know: where's the best chicken parm in New Jersey? No, but I am wondering. I'm no hockey coach, but seems to me GG changes the line too much. Players don't have an opportunity to develop as a single unit. Am I off on this?
You're not off on that at all. I actually wrote about that for my early story before the Devils game. The Rangers haven't had any continuity this season whatsoever. Negative continuity. I think they've had 3 stretches of 3 games where they've had the same lineup. Every other game to game basis there's been at least one lineup change, whether it was Zach Jones for Libor Hayek, vice versa, Vitali Kravtsov having to come out of the lineup because he was injured, which are, especially with Vitali Kravtsov, obviously that's not something that Gallant can control. But now that the Rangers are fully healthy, he's still changing the lines. And even after the Devils game last night, he admitted, he was like, I'm changing the lines too much. But as a coach, I can imagine that the only thing that he has control of when he's standing behind the bench and the Rangers are stinking up the ice in the first period is to change the lines, is to just change it up, just try to do something different, put out different combinations, and see if you can spark something. And that's something that Gallant has been doing since he arrived in New York last season. But that being said, there has to come a point where you settle on at least a top 6 combination, because the Rangers are a top heavy lineup and their top 6 is where they get a bulk of their offense. At least settle on a top 6 combination and just ride with it, especially when it comes to Alexis Lafreniere, Capo Caco, Filipino. You gotta give them an opportunity next to Mika Zibanejad, next to Artemi Panarin. I really like that top 6 combination with Kako and Lafreniere on the wings of Zibanejad and Hedl next to Artemi Panarin. Whoever is on the right wing, it really doesn't matter. I think that in terms of the organization's future, that's just something that needs to happen, and it's just been put off for too long. So it has been a little detrimental to the Rangers how they haven't had any continuity this season. So I would expect or hope that Gallant would settle on a lineup sometime soon and just try to ride with it.
Stinking up the ice. Yeah, Molly.
they were bad in the first.
Sometimes you have Chipotle before the game. That happens. Power play time has to change. First unit gets basically the whole 2 minutes. Maybe switch up personnel. Asks Jerry Scott and Alan Fask.
Yeah, this is another valid debate to have with the Rangers. It comes back down to the development of the young players too. Should Alexis Lafreniere, should Capo Caco, should Filipino be getting a chance on the first power play, or just in general more power play time to begin with? The answer is yes, but also when you look at that top power play unit, whether they're clicking or they're not clicking, it's one of the deadliest power play units in the entire National Hockey League. And that is actually the one part of the Rangers lineup that has had continuity. That unit has been together for a really long time. And so obviously you can't always be dominating, but they do go stretches where they do dominate. And I think from Gerard Gallant's perspective, there's more of a chance of that happening than he's willing to be giving the second power play unit or just the young guys on the second power play unit an opportunity to establish themselves as power play contributors, which I can totally see. It's a debate. You could argue both sides. You really can. But I do think that the Rangers are in such a precarious position in terms of their season and where they are in the standings that it's a safer bet to go with what you know, to go with the unit that's been together for so long and to give them a fair opportunity to get hot and to make the impact that they're known for making for the Rangers.
Well, coming up next on Up in the Blue Seats, we chat with Mr. Devil, Ken Daneyko. All right, we talked about the Rangers taking down the Devils in a rivalry renewed, or is it? We'll ask our next guest now. He is the Devils color analyst on MSG Networks. You catch him on the NHL Network as well. He's Mr. Devil, 3-time Stanley Cup champion with the Devils, playing his entire 20-year career there. You can also catch him on Cameo if you want a message, as well as Signed, SIGND. Check it out, Signed_official on Instagram. Ken Daneyko, you're a busy man, Ken. You're all over the map these days. How's it going? Welcome to the show.
Everything's going well, thank you. We're in the midst of the season, and it's been a lot of fun, obviously. And obviously, I do NHL Network, so I get to stay on top of all the teams. Yes, I'm a guy that roots for my team. I've been there 40 years, so obviously, I want my team to do well, and they've started the season very well. But during NHL Network, I just love the games, and when I work there, it's all about promoting the game and the skill of all the great players in this league. And I love the balance, the competitive balance in the league right now. I mean, there's just no easy nights. And anybody that thinks that you hear fans go, oh, you should win this. No, you shouldn't win any game. You've got to earn it for sure. That's my take anyway.
You were there Monday night. How electric was that? I mean, obviously, Devils take the big lead early. Rangers come back, win it in overtime. It's exciting times for both these squads right now, but definitely an electric atmosphere on Monday.
Yeah, it's always exciting, obviously, when these two teams meet, and finally it can become more of a rivalry again because of the way the Devils have played this year. And frankly, the whole metropolitan area. I mean, the better the Islanders, Rangers, and Devils are, that's how hockey is at the forefront in the area. So for me, there'd be nothing better than all three teams make the playoffs. I don't know if that's feasible, but saying that I would love that in my time anyway, or how much time I got left here. I hope that that transpires one day, and who knows, maybe this year. It's a long shot possibly because it's not easy to make the playoffs, but I think that would be fantastic because that's when you get those rivalries and heat it up, and that's what it's all about. Yesterday's game, look, great hockey game, a lot of fun from a Devils perspective. Yeah, you have two goal leads, and it's disappointing, but it's not going to go smooth. I look at it from a little different angle from the Devils' perspective. They got a point. For me, it would have been a disaster if they didn't get a point. And the Rangers were opportunistic, and they got elite players that can put the puck in the net. Hedl had a great game, big overtime goal. And the third period for New Jersey was fantastic. They played the way they wanted. They couldn't capitalize. Shesterkin, you tip your cap. He made some big saves. 2-on-1s and on Hughes and on Severson in overtime to allow the Rangers to get one scoring opportunity. Great pass from Panarin. That's what happens. That's what this game's about. But big win for the Rangers for sure. But for me, I don't get devastated over that. It's a point for the Devils. Every point matters because they are not going to be perfect, which they've been pretty darn good along the way. And they're going to go through tough stretches. This is a tough stretch for them. And if they would have got nothing, it would have been a disaster. They got a point. So that's, for me, I always look at the glass half full, and you have to, I think. And for the Rangers, that's a huge comeback win, and they did what they had to do to get the win.
Jumping right into it.
What we're seeing from the likes of Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, etc., this is the epitome of a breakout season. What do you feel like the Devils did as an organization that helped foster the development of these players to allow them to get to this point? Because I know Rangers fans are clearly getting frustrated the longer the breakouts of Lafreniere, Kakko, and Hedel are pushed off a little bit.
Well, they had to like Hedel last night. I thought he was a beast, and he had a goal and a great assist on the backhand play when they striked quickly with those 2 goals in 7 seconds. He made. I mean, people, those are the subtle things that was an elite play. If you saw that backhand pass he made to Miller, that was the play, not the pass Miller made. Yes, he joined the attack, but for me, it was that perfect pass, no look pass. So he'll had a big one, and he's shown signs that he can be real good. Look, for me, obviously, guys like Hughes and Hischier, because the team wasn't very good, probably got more opportunity, and sometimes that's what it takes. Did it go perfect for Jack Hughes early on? No, he was a young 18-year-old and didn't produce early on, and he wasn't insulated very well. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? For Kakko and Lafreniere, in my opinion, when you have a team that was, deeper like the Rangers and good teams the last couple of years, you have to bide your time. You have to earn those minutes. You have to earn power play time. And obviously when your team's going well, you're going to put Zibanejad out there, and Panarin out there, and Kreider out there. That's the obvious, because, you went to the Eastern Conference Finals last year. So that's the balancing act, I believe, in development for coaches, for management, that you have to really gauge. And sometimes players take a little longer than others. Kakko has scored a big goal last night for them as well. So for me, Hughes and Hischier got a little more opportunity. Nico Hischier's always been a 200-foot player, so you didn't have to teach him that as an 18-year-old. And that puts you ahead of the game. He is such a smart, intelligent player. Now his offense is going to another level because he's getting stronger. He's getting bigger, more puck protection, more confident. Hughes, you could see flashes of brilliance even at 18, but you knew it was going to take time because he dominated, at every level. But to do that in the NHL, you got to learn that you can't hang on to the puck as long. You have to see the ice at all times, and players are bigger, stronger. Well, the last half of the last year and this year, you're seeing that elite hockey IQ that we always use that terminology, and he's really taken it to another level. And he's a special player. He's a star in this league, and I don't put superstar on a player too lightly, or don't take that lightly. And he's on the verge of that, I would think. He's a real good player, and not the biggest player, but when you're as smart and skilled and elusive as Jack Hughes, now he sees the whole ice, and he doesn't put himself in vulnerable positions to get hit. So for Kakko, and I'll end it at this, for Kakko and Lafreniere, you just have to remain patient. They've got great signs of looking like they're going to be different players than Hughes and Hischier, but very successful in their own right. And like I said, maybe not the opportunities. And now they put those guys I know they've been juggling lines, the Rangers, and I know they got some top line minutes with Zibanejad. And when you play with a top player, an elite player in the league like Zibanejad, well, you get excited and you hope it takes you to the next level. And they've had a little success, and they juggled those lines a little bit yesterday. But these young guys, everybody wants it now. All of us, even us in the media. And I played 20 years, and I was getting impatient with maybe Jack Hughes going, is he good? How good is he? And then when it all started to come together, okay, now I see it. But I'd still give it some time with Kakko and certainly Lafreniere, because we look at guys just take maybe 3-4 years sometimes where they really find their stride, and there's still time.
Right. And I totally agree with your point about how the Rangers are built and how, you don't give the contracts that you did to Chris Kreider, Artemi Panarin, Mika Zibanejad, and not want to ride them as your top guys. So, and I totally agree with that. But do you feel like there is an art to the way organizations develop their young talent? Should they be thrown into the fire immediately or ushered along?
That's a great question, Molly. And
Thank you.
If I had the perfect answer, I'd bottle it and I'd be a millionaire.
Yeah, you'd be a president or a general manager of a hockey team, right?
But having said that and been around the game a long, long time, and certainly with the Devils for 40 years now. I can't believe, but just watching over the years and development of certain players. And yes, can you rush a player? Absolutely. Is there way more pressure in today's game, especially if you're a top 3, top 5 pick, to put them in your lineup too soon? And the pressure of that, absolutely. You see teams do it time and time again. Some guys aren't ready. And I mentioned Jack Hughes is an 18-year-old, probably could have used a year of college. But having said that, you've got to know your mentality of your players. Like Jack Hughes, is right away, I saw it, such a confident young man. And he was kind of, as much as we get impatient on the outside looking in and go, man, I hope he's not rushed. I hope he doesn't lose his confidence, get frustrated. I saw in him right from day one, even though he was a young guy and coming in, he believed in himself. He was a guy that was not going to get deterred. So even through the rough patches and when the team wasn't good and when he was struggling at times, you could tell he was just sitting there waiting to say to everybody, relax, just give me time. I will figure this out, because he had such confidence. So I think it's important for organizations to understand the mentality of guys. I'll give you an example way back in my day. So, and it's a funny one. It's a good story. I was 18th overall pick, and obviously I'm not a top 5 pick that's supposed to make the team right away. And Johnny McLean was 6th overall pick the year after me. I was 18th in 82. And the game was played much different. So I was going to be able to show my physicality. It wasn't as much about skill at the time. I could get my foot in the door because I was a physical, pretty tough player. And then I could develop my game, right? So that's a little different in the way the game was played. So they were I played as a 19-year-old, broke my leg. And as a 20-year-old, they were sending me down. And this is not a word of a lot of guys in camp. And I had an okay camp, but I played really well as a 19-year-old, even though our team was terrible. So I expected to make the team, and we weren't good on the back end. And they told me I was going down. And Tom McVie tells the story, and he howls about it still to this day. Well, him and Max McNabb are in the office, and I pointed to their board, and I go, "You got to be kidding me, right?" I said, "Are you kidding me? I'm the best defenseman you got." And they had all these pins. And I wasn't saying it out of cockiness. I wanted to play so bad. And I knew I was ready to play because I showed it the year before, but I had broken my leg. And I wanted to tell them I was still ready. And they stopped. And Tom McVie couldn't believe it. They both were at a loss for words. They loved my confidence. And they kind of said to me, "Go home, let us think about it." So I made them think about it before they sent me down. Now, flip the page. Johnny McLean was getting sent down, and Tom McVie, and he put it in the paper when they retired my number in 2006. He says, when John McLean came in and he was 6th overall pick, only had 1 goal in his first 23 games. They said they're sending him back to junior. He said it was like the weight of the Brendan Byrne Arena where we played was lifted off of his shoulders because the pressure was just getting to him at the time. And John went on and he played with the Rangers as well and had himself an incredible National Hockey League career. But he kind of needed to go back for that period to gain his confidence again and be that dominant player. So that's kind of looking at 2 players' different personalities and mindsets, right? So I think it's really important nowadays, especially when there's more pressure to get those top picks in the lineup. Sometimes, sending them down might be good, but then sometimes when they got to go back to junior, they've accomplished everything there. Right. So you want to nurture them slowly here. So I don't have a perfect answer. I hope some of those examples were good, but I think the best way is to really understand how tough they are mentally and that they can fight through it even when they go through struggles. If a guy can't, well, maybe you got to consider, even if he's a top 3 pick, that let him get more confidence. Whether if you're fortunate enough he's a European, you can sometimes send him to the minors. Like our 2nd overall pick, Simon Nemec. Nemec is getting to nurture in the American League, which he'd already played with men, and he didn't have to go to junior, which is invaluable, right? Right. That's great for him. So that rule of having to send guys to junior, sometimes kids like Shane Wright, for example, in Seattle, he's struggling. Went down, did very well for 5 games, bring him back, then he gets a goal. It showed his confidence grew a little. But does it benefit him to send him to junior? I'm not so sure. I don't have a perfect answer because he's been dominant there. I think he's, I believe, going to the World Juniors for Canada. So it's a great topic. It's a great conversation, Molly, certainly. And I hope I gave you somewhat of a roundabout answer, but it's very difficult for sure. And I would think management, for me, it's keeping their confidence up, telling them you believe in them. You know, a lot of it's psychological as well.
For sure.
Making the playoffs once in the last 10 years. I mean, were you growing impatient? Like it was this season and this start much needed? Because I feel like a lot of Devils fans started losing their minds the last decade.
Well, of course, it's disappointing, and it's all about winning, and it's a process, and it's not easy. And we kept saying the Devils, and I preached it too, that they have a lot of good prospects. Are they going to come together? When are they going to come together as a team? Every team in this league has high-end skill and speed and talent the way the game's gone, and I love it because the guys and the creativity that these players throughout the National Hockey League have is unprecedented and remarkable. Devils had some of that, but it was about adding some key veterans, getting a goaltender that could make a save more often than not. Goaltending's over 50% of it. Our goalies have been good this year. That's been a big difference. Last year they were injured. Last year they used 7 goaltenders. They probably would have had 20 more points. I know fans don't want to hear that, but that's the reality of the situation. They were much better than the record showed if they could have had some goaltending. Now, having said that, it's a fine line, again, winning and losing on a nightly basis. So this year, am I surprised? Of course I am. I didn't expect them to take off the way they have, but they started to come together, understanding the little things, play away from the puck, playing for each other, all those things that sound cliched, but they're true. And I speak from experience because I've been part of great teams and teams that win championships. Yes, you need skill and talent and guys that can put the puck in the net, a goaltender that can stop the puck, but it's still not enough. Everybody's got to understand situational play. When you're up 3-2, 4-2, to play smarter. Don't try to make a play that's impossible or high risk plays. And I'll even use an example last night. And the Devils have been excellent at it this year, but you're up 2-0. You don't need to keep pressing a little bit. Great execution by the Rangers on their first goal. Beasy, former Devil. I love Jimmy, by the way, and his family. Makes a great play pass on the tape in stride to Trocheck. It's a 2-on-1. For me, that maybe the defensive mind in me is saying, no reason, stay back. Mm-hmm. Now, it was executed well from the Rangers standpoint and quick passes, but that's just a mentality still in today's game where you got to balance out, where players go, want to keep on the offense. Get out of that period up 2-0, you probably win the hockey game. That's the bottom line. And we have been exceptional away from the puck and playing that way most of the year, and why they've had as many wins as they had. That one, a little lapse. Good teams execute and make you pay, and that's what the Rangers did to make it 2-1 at the end of the period. But overall, just extremely happy the way they have played. It's been fun. They make my job much easier because you don't have to sugarcoat it anymore, and they play hard. No, they're not going to win every night. No, they've lost a couple of games in a row. This league's tough, but they're playing the right way, and they're doing a lot of good things. And yes, these young guys are starting to develop along the way, which that makes it fun too, win or lose. Just watching the development of these guys and players, and the way they get better and better, and when they fight and when it clicks and they figure it out, and you watch from afar and you go, yeah, they're starting to get it. What, as far as an individual, and also as far as what it takes to win on a nightly basis. You can preach it to them. It's easier said than done. That's what coaches try. Every coach will tell you. Ask Coach Gallant, ask Ruff, ask throughout the National Hockey League. They get frustrated too. They're going, just listen sometimes. And sometimes players collectively don't want to. But so far, there's a long way to go. But it's been a pleasant surprise. I thought they'd be better. Didn't know how much better. And they've been off to a good start, but a long way to go.
Only second time this season they've lost 2 games in a row. I mean, that's something that the Rangers did last season. They barely lost 2 games in a row ever.
That's important for sure, because this league, like I said, you're going to go in a little stretch, but that you might lose 3-4 in a row. It just happens. There's too many good teams, like I mentioned, Molly. But having said that, they banked some points that you don't have to put pressure on yourself to get out of it. Everything's not going to go your way. Some things have gone their way. Yesterday, break here, save there. Jack Hughes scores the penalty shot. Game over pretty well. Shesterkin makes a great poke. That's part of it. It can get frustrating, but when you've got some points in the bank, you can take a step back and say, okay, not always going to go our way,
Right.
but let's get back to doing what's made us successful and win hockey games.
You mentioned, I like this part about, when you send players down
to the American Hockey League or juniors or whatever it may be, sometimes it's not worth it because they've already been so dominant at that level. And the only way for them to continue on an upward trajectory is to only be in the National Hockey League. And I feel like that's been a topic of conversation for a guy like Alexis LaFreniere recently, just because when you look at Kakko and Philip Hedl, those two have kind of been more impactful players than Lafreniere has. And it actually segues into a subtext question that we got from Gerald Iacovoni. Is it time to officially be worried about Alexis Lafreniere, his third NHL season, and he looks nowhere close to justifying being the first overall pick in the draft? Julien Gauthier has more goals in fewer games. He's starting a pattern of taking bad penalties. He's missing open nets and doesn't seem to be as physically engaged as he used to be. Your take, Ken?
Well, you know what? And when you go number one overall, there's a lot of added pressure to that, obviously. And, and he was a goal scorer everywhere he's played. And sometimes as a player and individual, you can get frustrated for sure. But I think you have to give it time. I really do. I mean, look, maybe he doesn't develop into that elite 40 goal scorer, but he still can be a valuable player. I think sometimes people put too much emphasis on where you go. He was the consensus number one. Everybody would have taken him number one. Yeah. It is what it is, right? Now you try to develop him into a good NHL player and make sure he doesn't lose confidence. You know what I mean? Along the way, he's big, he's strong. He wants that consistency, the physicality, because he's going to have to score his goals that way by body position, by using that strength, right? And his shot. He's got to get it into position to get his shot off, correct? Because he's got a really good shot. So I think you have to give it more time for sure. But I understand at times because we all want it now. We get impatient, whether it's fans, whether it's media, whether it's management, whether it's coaches, right? Yeah. Along the way. But I still feel sometimes bigger guys, just certain players, it can take as much as 5 years before it kind of sinks in and they get it. Right. I mentioned that earlier, but now you go, okay, there it is.
Yep.
But it may not be the level that you expected for a number one overall. Who knows?
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter from the standpoint that if you can become a real good, solid NHL player and help your team win, well, that's important as well, right? Along the way.
A rivalry is always better when both teams are good. This year that's the case. In the past, when you played, the Rangers and Devils was a true rivalry. Did you hate them? Like when you went up against, like, did you look at their face and said, like, "I hate you, Henrik," like, or whoever? That was after your time, but wow. Did you hate those guys?
We've talked about it many times, or I certainly have over my career, and I'm obviously very good friends with a lot of former Rangers and grew up with Mark Messier. A lot of people know, and he was a dear friend and a big mentor of mine, actually, growing up in Edmonton, Alberta. I've known him since 12 years old. So, I give him a lot of credit for really being around all those Oiler dynasties and watching how those guys carry themselves and how Mark did in particular and helped me become an NHL player and be part of something, part of a team and understanding my role and everything. So when he was in Edmonton, we used to send notes to each other, or he'd send me notes. Him and Kevin Lowe, who I was friends with as well, and would send me notes before the game. Our team wasn't very good. We played twice a year. They always wished me the best and sent some funny notes. When he came to New York, we barely spoke for 2 years. So that kind of sums it up. Yes, we hated each other because now it's a rivalry. Now we're vying for the Stanley Cup. Now we were two elite teams. That 94 series and 94 year, we were 1-2 in the National Hockey League in the regular season. So we were the two best teams in the regular season and met in an epic Eastern Conference Finals. So yeah, there was hatred. The game was played more intimidating back in my time. And I will say, everybody asks, well, could you play today's game? Compare I go, listen to me. The technology, the training, everything's different. No different in business. You approach things differently. I had to train like a middle linebacker because I knew I had to be big, physical, strong. I used to be an offensive player and had a little bit of everything in junior, but I had to focus on what was going to keep me in the NHL. And that was being a big, strong, physical player. And having to drop the mitts a handful of times, certainly at the first 5 years of my career. So that's the way we train. If we if it was different in the way the game's gone, which I loved it. I've gone with the times. I love the high-end skill, but that's the way they train now because the game's evolved. It's changed. They protect players at all costs. There's rule changes. I know a lot of people still like the old school hockey, but I understand why it's changed. I get it, and I agree with it because you're protecting players from, massive head injuries and all those kinds of things. And I think the National Hockey League's done a good job of making sure players are protected. And we could see all the great skilled players. And now we see fourth liners that can toe drag you when a defenseman goes down. That's why I'm telling defensemen even more so, stay on your feet. These guys are too good. In my day, we could go down against the third and fourth liner. He couldn't make the play. He'd try to saucer it to go in your pads. Now it's not just the top two lines, which we had the greats of Gretzky's, Messier's, Lemieux's, Sakic's. Those guys could play in any era and be dominant in any era, right? But meaning my era was my era. I loved it. There was probably more hatred. There was probably more of a rivalry. But today's era, I love it too. I've moved on, and I don't compare really because we would have trained differently. So I don't know. Yeah, I think I would have worked more in the skill part of the game, but we had to find our niche, right, in the National Hockey League. The only guy I'll tell you I couldn't hate was Brian Leach because he's so graceful, such a nice guy, incredible player. And I'd always see him in the summer, and I'd joke, and I said, you know what? I always prided myself, for the most part, we always do things we regret. If I'd rather get beat up by the toughest guy in the league than pick on a guy that wasn't that type of player. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do anything to stop him and take him out if you can. But I was just all one of those guys. I hated bullies. I hated them on the ice. I was a guy, for the most part, and don't get me wrong, I'm sure I did it once or twice, but that was my mentality. You know what I mean? And, I'd much rather like I said, challenge the toughest guy and maybe not do so well kind of thing than beat up a guy that I know I can beat up or physically take advantage of. That's my mentality on the ice, off the ice, even as a little kid. And Leach was such a classy guy. And another guy who I had, besides Mark, who, like I said, was a mentor, and you can name so many guys, but Mike Richter, what a great goalie. He was a huge difference and just a gentleman, and get to see him at charity events. And Adam Graves, we did battle a lot in front of that. He was strong as a bull and a great goal scorer. And boy, I would cross-check him over the back a lot. And he would barely budge, but he took it and he would just do what he had to do, and he'd give it back. And then I've gotten to know him off the ice. And I will tell you, I've heard it from a lot of Ranger fans or other people in general in the hockey world. He truly is the most sincere, heartfelt, nice guy there is. And I love that because, we hated each other when we played and we had to compete. But I have such respect for guys after the game when you find out you become good friends. Ty Doan, who was a young, tough Ranger, he'd always challenge me. I was already 10, 11 years into the league. I'm going, not again, Ty. I really don't enjoy you hitting me or me trying to hit your head. That's the hardest thing that I've ever hit. And I'm friends with him now. He's a great guy. He's got a good heart. We were competitors. You know what I mean? That's what it was all about. You find out you're a lot alike 5-10 years after your career. Maybe the first few years you're still skeptical to get to know the guy. But our era was fun because there was a lot of hatred for sure, and that's the way you competed. I felt if I got too close or was nice to a guy, it was going to take away from what I had to do.
Well, that's what's interesting. Like then on an off day, you weren't getting beers with Mess. Like now after your career, sure, but like on a Thursday, you're both off. You're not going to Marquee on a Thursday night and pumping your fist with Mess. But now after your career, you will.
You're right.
Today, I feel like they're friends on Instagram. Like, Jets are friends with the Giants, Mets are friends with the Yankees. It's just different. Everyone's pals. Where in your era, they whoop your ass.
It is what it is. But at a few watering spots in New York when we had a little more fun in the 80s or 90s when Mark was in New York, I'd happen to run into a few of the guys, and I wouldn't talk too much to many players, but when Mark was there, we would give a hug because we had to, because of the friendship went deep. Then that was it. We made sure nobody saw us do that.
Yeah. In private.
And we'd have a few laughs and maybe a quick beer, and that was it. And then, all right, Mark, see you later. Let's no more talk.
Yeah, no more small talk.
Our own crowd.
Yeah, no shared shots of tequila in the same group.
I couldn't lie about that, but it's
Ken Daneyko. You can check him out at MSG. What's it called now? SportsNet, right? They changed the name from MSG Plus to MSG SportsNet.
I'm trying to keep up, but yes.
Yeah, they keep changing everything these days. NHL Network as well. Follow him on Twitter at Ken Daneyko MSG. Check him out on Sign and on Cameo. Ken, great to catch up with you. Maybe we'll talk to you in the playoffs. Rangers, Devils in the playoffs. How about that?
Wouldn't that be unbelievable? Like everything's. We go look at yesterday's game and the fans. I love it. The passion, both fans, and they want their team to win. It's one game, but they take it, to the nth degree. But wouldn't there be nothing better than a playoff series, right?
It would be epic.
That would be epic. And one thing I want to say, and I appreciate you bringing up Sign, which is a relatively new company, but it's an autographed item with a message. So kind of a combination of Cameo and with an autograph item. It's pretty cool. The box you open up and it's a surprise. And I'm doing some hockey stuff for them, not just sending out stuff. So I'm, a new venture that you always like to push a little bit and help them move along forward. But I appreciate you mentioning it. SIGND. I appreciate that.
SIGND.com. Your accountant's busy now.
I spelled it wrong. I can't even spell. You got it right. But look on Instagram. It's pretty cool. They got some great athletes. I'll use one great basketball player. Marcus Smart's part of it. So you can get a signed basketball and a message from Marcus Smart of the Boston Celtics as well. He's one of many guys on there.
Well, check it out and check Ken out on there. And we'll talk to you later in the year. Thanks, Ken.
Thanks for having me, guys.